Hi guys, and welcome to Calm Night Radio Channel. Tonight we slip into the year 1805 and step quietly into a world that history often mentions in hard, cold numbers, but rarely lets you feel. What did an ordinary morning truly look like for a black woman when the sky was still dark, the air still damp, and the day already belonged to someone else? What secrets lived in the silence before sunrise? When the fire had to be coaxed awake, the water had to be lifted, and every sound might mean duty was already calling. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you are here, comment below with your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights, and you wake long before daylight, not because you are rested, but because rest is a luxury the year 1805 does not hand out freely. The room around you is dim and close. The air smells of old smoke, damp wood, and wool that never quite dries. The floor is rough beneath your bare feet, cool enough to make you pull your shoulders tight for a moment. Somewhere nearby, someone shifts in sleep. A child sighs. A board creaks. Outside, the world is not yet bright, but it is not still either. You hear the far cough of livestock, the rustle of wind moving through trees, and the faint clink of metal from someone already beginning the day. You rise carefully. That matters. In a crowded cabin or a cramped loft above a kitchen, every movement has weight. Elbows meet walls. Skirts catch on stools. A loose door can groan loud enough to feel like a trumpet in the dark. You tie your head covering with quick fingers, worn from repetition. The cloth is soft in places and stiff in others, carrying the scent of soap, ash, and your own skin. Your dress is practical, plain, and meant for labour, not admiration. Coarse linen scratches lightly at your wrists. The seams have been mended enough times to tell their own story. You do not have the luxury of easing into consciousness. Morning in 1805 arrives like an order. On many farms and plantations across the American South, enslaved women were expected to begin work before sunrise, especially in busy seasons. In towns and port cities, free black women and enslaved women alike often worked as cooks, laundresses, servants, hawkers, or market women. The jobs changed by region, status, and season, but the rhythm was familiar. Rise early, move quickly, waste nothing. Complain to no one who holds power, a very soothing arrangement, if you happen to be the person making the rules. You bend near the hearth and stir yesterday's fire back to life. The ashes whisper when you touch them. There is an art to it. Too rough, and the little glow disappears. Too soft, and nothing catches. You blow until your cheeks warm and a tiny orange pulse brightens under the grey. Then comes the smell of rekindled flame, sharp and comforting at once. Smoke curls upward and hangs low before finding its path. It stings your eyes. Your hands reach for wood, for iron, for a pot that still carries the soot of 100 meals. Water is next. Water is always next. It must be fetched, lifted, poured, heated, carried again. The handle of the bucket bites into your palm. The path outside is slick with dew or thin mud, depending on the weather. The dawn air feels cold on your face, carrying scents of earth, stable straw, and wet leaves. In summer, the insects whine before the sun appears. In winter, your breath clouds in front of you, and the wooden pail feels like ice. If you live on a plantation, the day may already be divided in the minds of others: house labour, field labour, childcare and dairy work, spinning, washing, food preparation, poultry tending, candle dipping, soap making, nursing the sick, mending clothes, carrying messages. Some women did several of these in a single day. Some did all of them in a week. Historians agree that black women's labour in early 19th century America was constant and adaptable, but they still debate how often plantation owners recorded that work accurately. The documents loved output. They were less interested in exhaustion. You step back inside, and the room feels warmer now, though only just. Heat from a fire does not spread evenly. One side of your body begins to thaw while the other stays chilled. You set the water to warm. Your fingers move through familiar tasks without needing much light. Cornmeal, salt, a spoon worn smooth by many hands. Perhaps there is pork fat if supplies allow. Perhaps there is only what can be stretched. Meals at this hour are less about pleasure than endurance. You may be feeding children first, you may be feeding a household that does not belong to you, you may be preparing food you're not free to sit and enjoy. There is a particular irritation in smelling bacon crisping, bread toasting, or coffee brewing while knowing your own portion will be smaller and quicker. The kitchen can be full of tempting aromas and very little fairness. You learn to work inside that contradiction. Your nose notices everything. Your stomach learns patience. For many black women in 1805, clothing was issued sparingly, or bought second-hand with hard-saved money. Shoes were often stiff, badly fitted, or missing altogether. In some places, enslaved people received a yearly allotment of coarse garments, enough to cover the body but not enough to spare it. Fabric mattered, linen for heat, wool for cold, cotton when available. Yet nothing fancy was the point. These were clothes expected to wear out against tubs, fields, smoke, and weather. Fashion existed, of course, but survival usually got there first. A curious detail from the period drifts in through kitchen and yard records. Some women use goose grease or bare fat on skin and hair in harsh weather, especially when wind and lye soap left both painfully dry. Not exactly the luxury aisle, but practical. Early American life had a strong talent for turning the entire animal into a household strategy. You can almost feel it on your hands now, rubbed in quickly against cracking knuckles, leaving a faint, gamey scent that no rosewater bottle is arriving to disguise. The sky outside begins to pale, not bright yet, just a soft thinning of darkness. The first birds start, hesitant at first, then more certain. Roosters follow with their usual dramatic self-importance. You listen while you work. People in your world rely on sound as much as sight. Wheels on a road, hooves in a yard, a baby's cry, a door opening too sharply, the tone of a voice across a distance. Sound can tell you what mood the morning is in before anyone says a word. You are alert not simply because there is much to do, but because watchfulness is part of survival. A black woman in 1805 must read faces, pauses, and silences. In slaveholding regions, the danger is obvious and immediate. Orders can change without warning. Tempers can flare. A task done too slowly can be treated as defiance. A task done too confidently can also be treated as defiance. A terrible little game. The rules shift, yet punishment remains very real. Even where you are legally free, freedom does not wrap around you like a shield. In northern cities, free black women often lived under harsh economic pressure, racial hostility, and legal restrictions that narrowed opportunity. Domestic service was common. Laundry work was punishing. Street vending could bring income, but also harassment. A free paper might prove your status on one street and fail to protect you on the next. Your body still moves through a world that thinks it has the right to question your place in it. You finish one task and feel 3 others waiting. There is washing to begin. The smell of lye hangs harsh in the air, almost metallic in your nose. Wet cloth slaps against your hands. Water cools quickly once lifted from the fire. In wealthier homes, laundry could mean endless sheets, shirts, stockings, petticoats, aprons, towels, and table linens. Each item carries dirt from someone else's comfort. Soap roughens the skin. Steam dampens your sleeves. Your back bends, then bends again. Children may be tied to your routine with invisible thread, a baby on one hip, a toddler underfoot, a child old enough to help, but still young enough to need guiding. Black women in this era often carried the double burden of caring for white households or white children, while also struggling to protect and nurture their own families. Affection did not erase imbalance. Skill did not soften injustice. And yet tenderness still existed, stubborn and human. You smooth a child's hair. You wipe a nose. You press a quick kiss to a warm forehead before turning back to the fire. Some mornings include spinning or sewing before full daylight. The thread runs over your fingers. The wheel hums low. Needles flash when the fire catches them. Textile work was everywhere in early American homes, and black women were central to it. They spun flax and wool, patched clothing and pieced quilts, repaired hems, and made old fabric useful again. A dress became an apron became a rag became tinder. Nothing retired gracefully. You may hear conversation start around you now. Murmured, careful, sometimes playful, if the space allows it. Humour survives in even the hardest corners of life, and often with better timing than dignity. A raised eyebrow can say what speech cannot. A muttered remark over burnt porridge can earn a hidden smile. Gentle sarcasm is one of humanity's more durable inventions. It travels well through history. Religion, too, may be present in the morning, though not always openly. A whispered prayer before work, a line from scripture remembered by ear, a small appeal for strength before the yard fills and the day hardens. Black women in 1805 often lived at the crossing point of African traditions, Protestant Christianity, local custom, and personal practice. Scholars still disagree about how much spiritual continuity from African homelands remained visible in daily life, especially in areas shaped by intense surveillance and forced conversion, but traces endured in rhythm, naming, healing, memory, and the quiet insistence that life held meaning beyond labour. As daylight finally edges across the world, you step outside again and feel the morning settle fully onto your skin. The grass is wet against your ankles. The sky has turned from charcoal to pearl. Smoke rises from nearby chimneys in thin blue lines. Somewhere, a cartwheel grinds forward. Somewhere else, someone sings just one line before stopping. The smell of manure, bread, wood smoke, and damp soil mingles into the unmistakable perfume of early 19th century rural life. No candle company on earth would dare market it, and yet there it is, honest and unforgettable. You carry what needs carrying, a basket, a bundle, a child, a kettle. Your shoulders learn the shape of burden early. Your hands become strong in ways nobody plans to praise properly. The world notices what you produce more than what it costs you to produce it. That is one of the cold truths at the centre of this life. Black women's labour helped sustain farms, households, markets, and local economies throughout the Atlantic world in 1805. And yet records often flatten them into categories such as wench, cook, washer, nurse, or girl. Imagine reducing an entire human being to a task and then pretending the paperwork explains her. Still, within the narrow spaces allowed to you, a self remains. You choose how tightly to tie a scarf. You hum a tune under your breath. You save a better scrap of cloth. You memorize who is kind, who is dangerous, who can be trusted with a word, and who cannot be trusted with silence. You notice the colour of the sunrise even when nobody has asked your opinion of it. You know which floorboard avoids a squeak. You know how to stretch meal, soothe fever, quiet a frightened child, and protect your thoughts while your hands stay busy. This knowledge is power of a sort, not the kind that laws respect, but the kind that keeps life going. And so the morning fully opens. Daylight reveals the worn yard, the smoky roofline, the uneven fence, the path packed hard by many feet. The work ahead has shape now. It is visible. It waits for you in pots and pails, in fields and washhouses, in kitchens and doorways, in the ordinary demands of a society built on hierarchy and extraction. You stand in that pale early light as a black woman in 1805 surrounded by necessity, carrying skill, fatigue, caution, and endurance all at once. The day has only begun, and already you have given it fire, water, motion, and care. By the time the sun has cleared the horizon, your body is already deep inside the machinery of work. This is not the sort of work that begins with a bell and ends with a tidy sense of completion. It spills, it overlaps, it follows you from hearth to yard, from wash kettle to table, from field path to bedside. In 1805, for many black women, labour is not one role but a stack of roles balanced on tired shoulders. The hands that stir breakfast may also scrub shirts, soothe a child, carry wood, milk a cow, patch a hem, weed a row, and still be expected to look ready for whatever comes next. The morning light helps, but only a little. It shows dirt more clearly. It reveals the grease on a pot, the streak on a plate, The spots on linen, the dust along a shelf. The house wakes, and with waking comes demand. Someone wants food hotter, someone wants water fresher, someone has misplaced a spoon, a cap, a glove, and naturally this becomes your problem too. Domestic labour has a sly way of making itself look invisible once done, yet painfully obvious when delayed. A floor can be scrubbed on your knees for an hour, and the only review is that nobody mentions it. If you work inside a household, the kitchen becomes your orbit. Heat presses against your face, smoke curls into your hair. Iron pots feel heavy even before they are filled. You lift lids and get a burst of steam across your wrist. You sweep ashes, wipe tables, gut fish, shell peas, knead dough, salt meat, and skim kettles with a wooden spoon worn thin at the edge. Early American cooking is not delicate, it is physical. Grinding corn, hauling water, splitting fuel, and keeping the fire steady all turn a meal into a small campaign. There is skill in every part of it. Bread must rise according to weather, not wishful thinking. Meat must be watched by scent and colour. Cornmeal must not clump. Milk must be kept as cool as possible before it turns. You learn the moods of iron and flame. You know which pot runs hot. You know which corner of the hearth bakes best. You know the smell of beans almost done. The soft hiss of fat at the right heat. The warning scent of scorching before anyone else notices. Nobody writes songs about your timing, which feels like a missed cultural opportunity. Then there is washing. Laundry in 1805 is one of those tasks that sounds simple until you remember water has to be carried, heated, and used wisely. Clothes must be sorted by dirt, cloth type, and urgency. Lye soap bites the skin. A paddle or bare hands work garments in steaming tubs. Stains are attacked with rubbing, soaking, scraping, and hope. Shirts, shifts, aprons, stockings, sheets, baby cloths, table linens, and work rags pile up in a damp mountain that never seems to shrink as quickly as your energy does. The smell of laundry day is harsh and memorable. Wet cloth, wood smoke, lye, sweat. Sometimes sour milk from children's things, sometimes blood from rags, sometimes the faint sweetness of homemade soap if extra fat or herbs were available. You lean over a tub long enough for your lower back to burn, your fingers wrinkle, your shoulders tighten. In cold weather, your hands ache deep in the joints. In hot weather, steam turns the wash space into its own weather system. You wring, lift, rinse, wring again, then hang linen where sun and wind can do their part. Historians widely note that laundering was among the most physically punishing household tasks in the early 19th century, and black women were pushed into it constantly in both urban and rural settings. Free black women in cities often earned cash through washing and ironing for wealthier families. Though the wages were usually meagre, enslaved women did the same labour without pay, plus whatever else the household required. Records preserve bills for washing. They rarely preserve what it felt like in the spine. Ironing comes later, once cloth dries enough to be coaxed flat. Heavy irons are heated near the fire and lifted carefully, because dropping one can scorch fabric or toes with equal determination. You test the heat by instinct. Too cool, and wrinkles laugh at you. Too hot, and the cloth takes on a brown kiss of disaster. Smooth, fold, stack, repeat. Order must be produced out of endless softness and dampness. The irony is almost poetic. Almost. Yet indoor labour is only one branch of the day. On farms and plantations, many black women in 1805 also work outdoors for long stretches. In tobacco regions, rice regions, indigo's fading aftermath, wheat country, kitchen gardens, and small farms. Their labour helps feed households and markets alike. You take up a hoe, you bend to weed, you plant, gather, carry, sort, and strip. Sun lands hard on the back of your neck. Mud clings to your shoes or your bare feet. Insects find you with insulting confidence. Your skirt catches burrs. Your shoulders take the steady pulse of repetitive strain. Field labour has its own sounds, hoes striking earth, insects in the grass, distant calls from other workers, the squeak of a cart axle, dogs barking somewhere near the road, A crow with opinions on everything. The smell is all earth and green things, mixed with sweat, manure, crushed weeds, and sometimes river air if water runs nearby. You straighten for 1 second and feel your spine complain like an elder at a crowded family dinner. The exact work changes by region. In the Chesapeake, tobacco still shapes routines even as crop patterns shift. In the Low Country, rice culture remains brutal and highly skilled, with women often central to processing and field work. On smaller farms, labour is less specialised and more chaotic. You might milk at dawn, weed by mid-morning, spin in the afternoon, and return to cooking by evening. That flexibility is praised when owners describe it, but from your side it means there is always another task ready to claim you. A quirky detail from scattered diaries and household records slips out here. In some communities, women use bluing made from indigo or other agents to make white fabrics appear cleaner and brighter after washing. It was a clever bit of visual trickery, though not really trickery if the garment had indeed survived a battle with dirt, lie, and weather. The cloth might still be patched in 3 places, but at least it could look crisp from across the yard. Human beings have always appreciated the confidence of a fresh shirt. Sewing and mending often fill whatever small gaps other tasks leave behind. There is no true free time in this kind of day, only moments temporarily claimed by a different form of work. You sit near light if you can get it. Needle in, needle out. A sleeve torn at the seam, a stocking worn thin at the heel, a shirt cuff frayed into softness. A child's garment lengthened with a strip of older cloth. Nothing good is thrown away casually. Fabric is labour in visible form, and you do not waste labour. Needlework can be strangely intimate. You hold another person's clothing in your hands and see the shape of their days in it. Dirt at the hem, wear at the elbow, sweat in the collar, a missing tie, a hastily torn edge. Clothes tell on people. They whisper their habits. They reveal who kneels, who runs, who sits, who labours, who is cared for, and who must make do. Black women often knew these private truths while remaining excluded from any public authority. You can read the household better than the household can read itself. Care work presses in as well. A baby cries. Someone is feverish. A child needs feeding. An elder wants help sitting upright. Nursing, tending, soothing, and cleaning bodies are major parts of the labour economy, though they rarely receive the same formal mention as crop yields or account books. Black women often served as healers within their families and communities, drawing on herbal knowledge, experience, and practical observation. Historians still argue over how much African medical knowledge remained directly traceable in early American black communities, but many agree that women preserved important remedies through practice rather than paper. You may bruise mint, sassafras, or pennyroyal between your fingers and release a sharp green scent. You may steep willow bark, apply poultices, or cool a forehead with water. Some remedies help, some comfort more than cure. Some are learned from elders, some from native neighbours, some from European household medicine, and many from a blend of all 3. Survival encourages creativity. It also encourages memory. One woman's whispered advice can outlive a doctor's visit by decades. Midday does not bring rest in any modern sense. It may bring a quick meal eaten standing or crouched, with one eye still on the next demand. Cornbread, porridge, greens, a piece of salt pork if luck and status allow, maybe beans, maybe fish, maybe leftovers coaxed into respectability. You eat quickly because work does not pause long enough to become considerate. The food is warm in your mouth, filling for a moment, then gone. The bowl is washed and returned to use. In towns and cities, the pattern shifts but does not soften. Free black women might move through streets with baskets on their arms, selling produce, cakes, oysters, or small goods. Others hire out as cooks, seamstresses, nurses, or charwomen. Urban life means noise, wheels over stone, men shouting at docks, bells, horses, vendors, church sounds, children darting around corners. The smell is stronger too. Fish, tar, dung, smoke, bread, sewage, sea air, beer, and hot brick all fighting for first place. Opportunity exists there. Yes, but so do surveillance and insult. Work must be done while navigating suspicion, regulation, and racial hostility. Even in places where black women can earn wages, the money is rarely secure. Rent takes some, food takes more, clothing, fuel, and debt eat the rest. Some women support children alone. Some pool money through kin or church circles. Some save toward freedom for relatives. Some use wages to keep a fragile household intact in a world eager to break it apart. Freedom on paper does not make flour cheaper. There is also the labour of performance. You keep your face composed when someone speaks sharply. You answer in the tone most likely to avoid trouble. You appear neither too slow nor too proud. That calculation is work. Emotional discipline becomes another unpaid skill, perhaps the most exhausting one because it never leaves bruises anyone else can admire. You swallow irritation. You smooth fear. You store anger where it can survive without being seen. And yet, not every moment is only burden. Human beings smuggle life into hard days with astonishing talent. During husking, washing, cooking, or sewing, a tune may rise. Someone might joke about a rooster strutting like a magistrate. Another woman may lean close and offer a comment so dry it could preserve meat. Laughter cracks open the heaviness for 3 seconds, and those 3 seconds matter. Shared work can create fellowship, even where the conditions themselves are unjust and grinding. By late afternoon, the light turns warmer and the body feels heavier. Muscles throb in familiar places. Apron ties rub. Smoke clings to your clothes. Damp fabric at the hem cools against your legs. You lift another bucket. You gather another armful. You answer another call from another room. The astonishing thing is not simply that the work continues, it is that the worker continues within it, adjusting, enduring, inventing methods, preserving dignity in fragments. A black woman's labour in 1805 is often described in records as useful, strong, capable, fertile, reliable, prime. The language is chilling in its plainness. It values output while pushing personhood into the margins. But lived reality is more textured than those labels. The worker knows texture literally. Rough corn sacks, hot pot handles wrapped in cloth, slippery soap, splintered wood, wet sheets heavy as apology, a sleeping child's soft cheek against a tired shoulder. These are the real terms of the day. Evening will ask for supper, cleaning, mending, and probably one more duty nobody mentioned at sunrise. That is how such days unfold. There is always one more bowl, one more shirt, one more child, one more path to walk, one more thing to carry. Work does not simply occupy time, it organizes the body, shapes thought, and teaches every joint how much a human life can be asked to hold. In 1805, black women hold far more than the age ever properly admits. By the middle of the day, you become acutely aware of your own body, not in some dreamy poetic sense, but in the blunt, practical way that 1805 insists upon. Your skin feels the season first. Summer lays itself over you like a hot, damp blanket that nobody had the courtesy to ask permission to use. Winter slips through cracks in walls, through thin cloth, through worn shoes, through every place where warmth should have stayed but did not. Spring means mud, autumn means wind. Every month has its own personality, and most of them are rather rude. Your clothing is never just clothing. It is weather protection, social signal, labour gear, and daily compromise all at once. For many black women in 1805 garments are plain, reused, repaired, handed down, altered, and worn until the cloth nearly gives up the argument. A dress may begin life as respectable enough, then fade, fray, and soften into a work garment. Sleeves are shortened, hems are lifted, tiers are patched with fabric that does not quite match. The result is rarely elegant in the polished sense, but often skillful in another way. A patched sleeve means someone refused to waste what could still serve. You tug at fabric that has grown stiff with soap or rough with sweat. Linen can scrape at the neck when salt dries in it. Wool may itch the shoulders and hold the scent of smoke. Coarse cotton, when you can get it, is kinder to the skin in warm weather, though it too collects dust and heat by the end of a long day. Nothing stays fresh for long when work is physical and water is labour. Cleanliness is desired, certainly, but the standards of comfort have to live within the limits of time, fuel, and access. Shoes are their own small trial. Good shoes are expensive. Poor shoes are cruel. Some women go barefoot in warm weather, especially during heavy labour, because worn soles and split leather offer little protection anyway. The ground tells you everything. Packed earth feels hard and dry under the ball of your foot. Yard mud squeezes cool between your toes. Straw scratches, gravel pricks. Floorboards warm in the sun and cool in shadow. In winter, bare feet on a rough plank floor can make your whole body tighten from the shock. If you do have shoes, they may pinch at the heel, rub the ankle raw, or fill with water at the first puddle. Fashionable discomfort has always existed, but this is discomfort with none of the glamour. Head coverings matter too. A scarf, kerchief, cap, or wrapped cloth keeps hair back from fire and work, shields the head from dust, and offers one of the few places where a bit of personal arrangement can show. The feel of cloth around your hair is familiar and grounding. It soaks sweat in summer. It helps hold warmth in winter. It also carries smell, and smell is never a small thing in a life of labour. Smoke from hearth fires settles into fabric. So do soap, damp air, cooked greens, onions, animal pens, and sun. You can tell where someone has spent the day without needing an introduction. Your skin keeps the score of the hours. Palms harden, knuckles split. Forearms grow stronger from carrying pails and children. Shoulders learn endurance. A scar may cross one finger where a knife slipped. Another may sit pale against the wrist where a kettle brushed too close. Sun darkens what the seasons expose. Wind roughens cheeks and lips. Lye soap leaves the hands chalky and tight. Grease rubbed into dry skin offers some relief, though it leaves a faint heaviness. The body adapts because it must, which history too often mistakes for ease. Enslaved women were frequently issued only limited clothing, often once or twice a year, and those garments were chosen for durability and economy rather than comfort. Free black women had more room to choose, but choice still had to answer to money, discrimination, and local custom. In cities, a neat dress and clean apron might help secure work or avoid certain insults. In rural places, sturdiness mattered more. Historians agree that clothing could mark status, labour, and respectability with great precision, though they still disagree on how much personal style black women could regularly exercise under such restricted conditions. The record catches purchases and inventories more readily than it catches pride, and pride absolutely exists. You smooth a skirt before stepping outside. You tie a kerchief with care. You mend a seam so neatly that only a close eye would find it. A polished appearance can be practical, yes, but it can also be moral armour. To appear orderly in a world eager to call you less than human is a statement, even if it is made with thread and patience instead of speeches. Sometimes dignity arrives looking like a clean cuff. Hair takes time, skill, and tenderness, though time is often in short supply. Hair may be braided, wrapped, twisted, or combed with methods learned from mothers, sisters, friends, and neighbours. Oils are precious when available. Grease, pomades, or simple household fats may be used to soften dryness. A comb dragged too fast through tightly curled hair can sting enough to water the eyes. A careful hand changes everything. In many black communities, hair care is not only grooming but social attention. It says you are seen. It says someone paused long enough to help. Even in harsh conditions, beauty is not absent. It simply has to work harder. A curious tidbit turns up in scattered descriptions of early 19th century life. Some women freshened breath or cleaned teeth with burnt bread, ash, charcoal, salt, or chewed twigs when commercial powders were out of reach. It sounds harsh, because it is harsh, though the age was not exactly famous for spa menus. Still, you can imagine the minty snap of a twig or the gritty scratch of ash against the teeth, an attempt to feel put together before stepping into a long day of close work and close quarters. Weather governs the body almost as much as law does. In summer, sweat gathers along the spine, under the headcloth, behind the knees, under stays if any are worn, and at the waistband where fabric traps heat. The smell of hot dust rises from the yard. Flies insist upon your company. Humidity makes the air thick enough to seem chewable. Cotton sticks to the skin. Breathing near a fire becomes its own punishment. You wipe your face with the back of your hand, leaving a faint mark of flour, ash, or garden soil. There is no graceful way through such heat, only endurance. Winter is different, but not kinder. Cold creeps in slowly at first, then seems to move into the bones and set up a permanent address. Fingers lose feeling around metal. Wet hems slap against the ankles. Wind finds any tear in a garment and enters like an uninvited landlord. The air smells cleaner in some ways, sharper, with wood smoke standing out more clearly against the frost. Yet cold increases work rather than reducing it. Fires need more fuel. Water feels crueler. Laundry takes longer to dry. Skin cracks at the fingertips. Lips split. Children cough more. The body hunches instinctively, trying to save heat where it can. Rain is its own miserable kingdom. Paths turn slick. Yard work becomes heavier. Mud clings to skirts in thick wet bands. A soaked dress drags at the waist and chills the legs. The smell of wet wool can turn an entire room stern. But rain also has textures of its own. You hear it drumming on shingles, tapping leaves, splashing in pails, muttering through puddles. A brief stand under shelter while the rain passes can feel almost peaceful, though the work waiting afterward is already preparing revenge. Touch defines so much of the day. Rough wood from a door handle, the smooth-worn bowl of a favourite spoon, the sting of steam on the forearm, the slipperiness of soap, the prickle of straw, the soft crown of a sleeping baby, the firmness of dough under the heel of your hand, the terrible weight of a soaked quilt lifted from rinse water. Early 19th century life is tactile in a way modern people often forget. Very little is done by pressing a button and walking away. Your hands know materials intimately because your hands are required to negotiate with them. There is also the touch of atmosphere itself. Kitchens hold dense heat near the fire and cool drafts near the floor. Wash spaces feel damp and close. Fields feel wide, glaring, and open to every shift of sky. A cellar may smell of earth and stored apples, cool against flush skin. A loft can feel stifling by afternoon, with dust and old cloth hanging in the air. Black women moved constantly through these different worlds, carrying work from one setting into another with barely time to register the change except in breath and skin. Body odour is one of those plain truths that polite history sometimes tiptoes around. But daily life did not. People sweated. They worked close to animals, ash, fire, and each other. Bathing habits varied by season, access, and circumstance. Full immersion was not always possible or convenient, but washing face, hands, neck, and feet when one could made a real difference. Some people scented clothing or bodies lightly with herbs, lavender, rosemary, mint, or homemade waters if they had them. Others simply relied on clean linen near the skin, which was considered important for health as well as decency. Black women, like everyone else, navigated bodily care within the practical limits of their environment. They just had fewer limits arranged in their favour. Pregnancy changed bodily experience even more. Many black women in 1805 laboured while pregnant and returned to work soon after childbirth. Sometimes shockingly soon. The weight of the belly, the ache in the lower back, the swelling in the feet, the nausea in morning heat, all had to be managed alongside ordinary obligations. Childbirth itself could be assisted by other women, midwives, kin, or neighbours, depending on location and status. Maternal bodies were deeply vulnerable, yet often treated as endlessly productive. That contradiction is one of the grimmest facts of the era. The body that carries life is also expected to carry water, wood, laundry, and command. Scholars continue to debate how well surviving records reflect black women's own views of beauty, bodily care, and presentation in 1805 because so many documents were written by observers rather than by the women themselves. White diarists noticed garments, head wraps, skin tone, and posture, but usually through the fog of prejudice. What they often missed was the inner intelligence behind these choices, a scarf tied to stay firm through a full day, a sleeve cut for movement, a patch placed where strain hits hardest. There is design in that. There is thought. Pain lives in the body too, sometimes sharp and sometimes so familiar it almost becomes background sound. Feet throb. Shoulders knot. The lower back pulses after carrying or bending. Menstrual pain comes whether labour pauses or not, which it usually does not. A headache blooms from smoke or heat. A tooth aches for weeks. A burn blisters. Yet the day rarely honours pain with room. You learn to place discomfort on a mental shelf and keep moving until there is a sliver of evening to notice how much you hurt. Still, the body is not only a site of wear, it is also a site of resilience, expression, and presence. You laugh and your whole chest loosens. You sing and breath changes shape. You sway slightly while rocking a child. You set your jaw when insult arrives. You carry yourself upright when possible, even with fatigue hanging from every limb. The body becomes the first archive of experience. It remembers where the path dips, how to lift without spilling, how to braid by feel, how to gauge weather from the wind on the cheek. It stores knowledge silently. As afternoon light shifts and shadows lengthen, you feel cloth rubbing in familiar places and sweat cooling across the back of your neck. Your hands are darker with work than they were at breakfast, marked by flour, dye, dirt, or ash. Your feet know each step before you take it. The body has been in conversation with weather, labour, and material all day long, and it will continue until night. In 1805, to live as a black woman is to know the world not only through thought, but through skin, muscle, breath, smell, ache, and motion. History sometimes records laws and ledgers as though they explain enough. But the truth also lives in the scratch of wool, the sting of cracked hands, the relief of a loosened head wrap, and the simple miracle of a body that keeps going. Shelter sounds comforting when spoken from a distance. Up close, in 1805, shelter can mean a drafty cabin, a crowded loft, a narrow room behind a kitchen, or a corner claimed by habit more than right. You live indoors, certainly, but indoors is not the same thing as safe. A roof keeps off some rain. A wall blocks some wind. A door suggests privacy. Suggests it. That is the important word. In a world shaped by power, your home may be where you sleep, where you store what little is yours, where you hold a child close at night, and still not be a place fully under your control. You step inside after a day's labour and feel the air change around you. Smoke hangs low from the hearth. The room is warmer near the fire, colder by the walls. Damp clothes release a faint sour scent as they dry. Earth underfoot, if the floor is not planked, gives off its own smell, especially after rain. Wood swells and shrinks with the weather. Shadows collect in corners. Light from a candle does not fill a room so much as negotiate with it. The flame makes one face clear and leaves the next in half dark. It flatters nobody. It also tells the truth. If you are enslaved on a plantation or farm, your sleeping place may be a cabin built cheaply and maintained poorly. In some regions, these cabins are one room. In others, they may be divided roughly, though division does not guarantee comfort. Chinks between logs are stuffed with clay, moss, or scraps, but cold still finds its way through. Heat does too. In summer, the room can feel close and airless. In winter, the fire struggles against the draughts with mixed success. The roof may leak in heavy rain. Insects claim the walls as if they paid rent, which, judging by their confidence, they assume they did. The bed is rarely a true bed in the fine sense. It may be a wooden frame with rope supports, a pallet stuffed with straw or corn husks, or blankets laid directly on boards. Straw shifts under your weight. Cornhusk mattresses rustle when you turn. Blankets smell of smoke, wool, dust, and skin. Sheets, when available, are precious. Shared bedding is common. Children sleep beside mothers. Siblings fit where they can. Privacy is a luxury often reserved for those already overstocked with comforts. If you live and work in a larger household, the place given to you may be inside the main building yet still apart from its comfort. Some enslaved and employed black women slept in attics, basements, small closets near kitchens, or rooms tucked behind workspaces. These arrangements kept labour close at hand, convenient for the household, less delightful for the human being expected to wake instantly at the first cry, call, or clatter. The nearness to work means rest can be interrupted without ceremony. A baby stirs upstairs, water is wanted, a fire needs tending. You're always a few steps from obligation. A home should allow the body to loosen. Here, the body often remains half alert. You listen even while sitting still. A knock at the door, boots in the yard, a voice raised outside, rain beginning on the roof, a child coughing in sleep, someone returning later than expected. The night has its own noises, and not all of them are harmless. Black women in 1805 often carried not only fatigue into the evening, but caution. Walls could not always keep out intrusion, authority, or trouble. Sometimes the danger came from strangers, sometimes from the people nearest. For free black women, housing conditions vary widely by region, wages, and family support. In cities, you may rent a cramped room in an alley, a crowded boarding house, or a small dwelling shared with relatives or other workers. Urban shelter offers possibilities for community, church life, and paid work, but also overcrowding, disease, landlord pressure, and constant noise. Street sounds push through shutters, carts grind over stone, men argue outside taverns, dogs bark, bells ring. The smell of sewage or stagnant water can rise in warm weather and creep under the door as if invited. City life gives with one hand and pinches with the other. Rural homes bring a different kind of exposure. The dark beyond the door can feel immense. Trees creak. Wind presses at the walls. Owls call. Rain sweeps hard across the roof. Distances stretch between cabins, barns, and roads. Isolation can be peaceful on some nights, unsettling on others. If someone is sick, help may be far. If trouble comes, it may arrive before warning has fully formed in your mind. You become intimately familiar with the sounds of your dwelling. Which board squeaks? Which hinge complains? Which patch of roof drips first? Knowledge like that is practical, but it also reveals how much insecurity daily life expects you to master. Inside, every object matters because there are not many to spare. A chest or box may hold clothing, letters if any exist, a Bible, a bit of cloth, a comb, a spoon, a knife, a cup. A stool can serve as seat, table, step, and cradle support depending on the hour. Pegs on a wall hold garments or bags. A shelf keeps food away from rats when possible, though rats have a troubling belief in equal access. The room may be sparse, yet not empty. Human life fills it with signs. A folded kerchief, a patched quilt, a gourd dipper, a ribbon saved for best, a child's carved toy. These are not luxuries in the grand sense. They are proofs that someone lives here as a person, and not merely as labour. Cooking and sleeping often happen in close company. The hearth, where food is made and warmth gathered, also leaves soot on walls and ash on the floor. Pots hang overhead. Firewood leans in a corner. The smell of cooked greens, beans, cornmeal, and smoke settles into everything. By evening, the room may hold the odours of the whole day at once. Damp shoes drying by the fire, wet wool, supper steam, candle tallow, sweat cooling in cloth, the scent of a baby's hair after sleep. It is intimate, layered, and impossible to separate neatly, just like the lives within it. Scholars still dispute how much autonomy enslaved families had in arranging the interiors of their cabins, because the evidence is scattered and often filtered through hostile observers. Some archaeological work suggests personal touches were more common than our plantation records admit. Broken ceramics reused as tools, decorated pipes, beads, charms, carefully placed objects under hearths or thresholds, all hint at meaning carried into domestic space. Historians remain cautious about interpreting every find, but the idea is compelling. A room may be controlled from above, yet still shaped from within by the hands that sweep it, cook in it, pray in it, and lie awake there. A quirky household reality of the age is that pests are constant companions. Fleas, lice, bedbugs, mice, and rats move through many homes regardless of status. Though poor and crowded dwellings suffer worst. You shake bedding, you air straw, you store food carefully, you rub cracks with ash or herbs if someone swears it helps. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the bugs simply consider it seasoning. Sleep, when it comes, is asked to coexist with scratching, buzzing, and tiny feet in the walls. Charming, really, if one has a very experimental definition of charm. The idea of privacy is especially fragile. To dress, undress, wash, nurse, grieve, pray, or speak softly with someone you trust. You often have to create a pocket of privacy rather than rely on architecture to provide it. A curtain of cloth, a turned back, a conversation held low while others sleep, a walk outside under some pretext. Women become skilled at making a little shelter inside a larger exposure. You guard your thoughts, you guard your body when possible. You guard small possessions with quiet intensity because loss is easy and replacement is not. Home is also emotional territory, and that territory is unstable. Here you may laugh. Here you may discipline a child. Here you may share food with a neighbour. Here you may hide tears until the room goes dark. Yet the same space can hold fear. For enslaved women, the possibility of sale, punishment, or forced removal haunts domestic life. For free women, eviction, debt, harassment, and racial hostility can unsettle a household with brutal speed. A room can feel secure one week and precarious the next. That uncertainty settles in the body like a permanent draft. Children change the feeling of a home completely. A room with children is never only poor or cramped, it is also noisy, sticky, alive, and astonishingly inventive. A corner becomes a game. A wooden spoon becomes a horse, a drum, a wand, or an object of immediate sibling dispute. Laughter brightens even a narrow room. So does song. Black women often made home through care, rhythm, and routine as much as through physical structure. A child washed before bed, a prayer spoken over supper, a shawl tucked around small shoulders. These acts do not erase insecurity, but they push back against it. Neighbouring women can also enlarge the idea of home. In many communities, domestic life extends beyond one doorway. Borrowed salt, shared childcare, advice over a fence, a visit after dark with the news, comfort, or herbs for a fever. Communal life helps compensate for material lack. It also creates witnesses to one another's lives. To be seen by someone who understands the strain of your day can feel more valuable than any chair with polished arms. The richest households often had the finest furniture and the poorest understanding of what makes a room bearable. Night deepens and the room changes character. Firelight flickers lower, candle flames shorten. Sounds beyond the walls grow sharper because fewer human noises compete with them. You hear wind drag across the roof, a horse stamp in the yard, insects pulse outside the door. Someone in the room shifts on straw. Someone whispers. Someone snores with full commitment and no apparent shame. Sleep approaches slowly because the body is tired but the mind is not always willing to unclench. Many black women went to bed in 1805 knowing that the next day would demand the same labour, the same caution, the same endurance. Rest existed, but certainty did not. And yet home is not only deprivation, it can be the one place where your voice softens naturally. The one place where a head wrap comes off and your scalp finally feels the air. The one place where a joke can be told without performance. Where a pot scraped nearly clean still means something warm was shared. Where a child, half asleep, reaches for you without looking and finds you there. Such moments matter because they are ordinary and hard won. They are not grand victories. They are domestic mercies. You settle onto rough bedding and feel every muscle report the day's events. The room is imperfect in every direction, too crowded, too drafty, too smoky, too exposed. But it also contains your breath, your people if you're lucky enough to keep them near, your habits, your prayers, your hidden thoughts. Shelter in 1805 does not guarantee comfort. It does not promise safety. For black women especially, it often exists under pressure from outside power and inside need. Still, within those walls or under that roof, However fragile life gathers itself, a home can be threatened, cramped, and weary, yet still hold tenderness like a small flame protected by tired hands. Love in 1805 is rarely given the courtesy of stable ground. It exists anyway. It exists in cabins, alleys, kitchens, yards, churches, fields, and doorways. It exists under laws that barely honour it, under owners who can disrupt it, under employers who exploit it, under poverty that tests it daily. For black women, family life is not some softer little corner untouched by history. It is one of the main places where history presses hardest. You love people while knowing they can be taken, hired out, sold away, imprisoned, dismissed, or buried with very little warning. That knowledge lives under every embrace like a cold stone. You may be a mother, you may be a daughter, sister, aunt, wife, partner, godmother, foster mother, or all of these by turns. Family in black communities often reaches beyond what a legal document would recognise. Blood matters, marriage matters, so do chosen ties, shared burdens, and people who step into care because care is needed. A woman may help raise her sister's children, feed a neighbour's baby, tend an elder who is no direct relation, or become the person everyone calls for when illness or childbirth arrives. Kinship expands because life demands expansion. If you are enslaved, family is always vulnerable to force. This is one of the central cruelties of slavery, plain and undeniable. Husbands and wives may live on different properties. Children may belong in law to the status of the mother, while still being treated in practice as someone else's property. An owner's debt, whim, death, remarriage, or move can shatter a household without asking whether the people inside it have hearts. Sale notices, estate divisions, and account books record these ruptures in cold phrases. Woman, age 28, girl, age 6, boy, age 3. The language is dry enough to crack your teeth. Historians agree that family separation was a constant threat in slaveholding societies, though they still debate how often specific owners disrupted nuclear families compared with extended kin networks. The reason for the debate is grimly simple. Records were made by those holding power, and they often counted property more carefully than grief. But every surviving testimony, every narrative, every careful reading of estate papers points to the same truth. Black women lived with the possibility of losing people not through quarrel or accident alone, but through transaction. You feel that possibility in ordinary moments. A child asleep in your lap is not just a child. She's a whole future you cannot fully secure. A partner's voice at the door after dusk is not just welcome company. It is relief that he was allowed to come, that he was not detained, punished, sold, or sent elsewhere. A mother's hand on your shoulder is not just comfort. It is evidence that she is still here to give it. Affection becomes sharper in such conditions. So does fear. Motherhood carries both tenderness and strain. Black women in 1805 are expected to care for children whether or not the world cares for them in return. Feeding, washing, soothing, disciplining, guarding, teaching, carrying, and worrying fill the day and continue into the night. For enslaved mothers, the pain is doubled by the fact that their children can be watched, valued, or punished through the logic of ownership. For free mothers, poverty and racism create other pressures. Work may pull them away from children for long hours. Wages may vanish into rent and food. Illness may spread quickly in cramped housing. The mother's mind is never truly off duty. Still, children bring brightness that no system fully manages to stamp out. A toddler's laughter can tumble through a room like loose beads. A little girl might mimic an adult voice with dangerous accuracy and leave everyone struggling not to smile too openly. A boy may fall asleep with one hand still clutching a carved scrap of wood as if it were treasure. Children ask questions no one has time to answer properly. They sing nonsense songs. They resist washing with theatrical conviction. They turn spoons into drums and rags into capes. Life keeps insisting on itself. Names matter deeply in this world. A child's name may honour a grandparent, an absent father, a biblical figure, a beloved friend, or a hope the family dares to speak aloud. Naming is one of the few acts that can feel fully human and self-directed. Even when official records misspell, shorten, or replace names, families hold the true ones in speech and memory. A woman may answer to one name in public and another among her own people. That difference can hold an entire emotional history. Marriage is complicated by law, status, and geography. Free black couples in some places can marry formally, though the security that marriage offers is often limited by racist legal structures. Enslaved couples may form loving durable unions recognized by their communities but not protected by the law. A ceremony might be witnessed by kin, by a preacher, by no one but the moon and the nearest path. Jumping the broom is often remembered in later tradition, though the exact prevalence and meaning of such customs in 1805 varies by region and remains a subject of scholarly caution. Even so, black couples created commitments wherever they could, because people do not wait for unjust systems to bless their feelings before they start living them. A quirky little domestic truth appears in memoirs and oral traditions from later generations and likely echoes older practice. Courtship could unfold through visits, songs, exchanged ribbons, small gifts, or simply the repeated excuse of borrowing something that did not urgently need borrowing. Human beings have always found creative ways to say "I would like to see you again" without saying it too plainly. A borrowed kettle can carry a remarkable amount of meaning. For black women, partnership is often practical as well as emotional. A good partner may share food, repair a roof, mind a child, pass along news, protect a doorway, carry a burden, make you laugh, or simply treat you with the kind of gentleness that reminds you you're not machinery. Yet even loving relationships move under pressure. Distance separates couples. Different work demands strained time together. Violence from outside authorities intrudes. Frustration and exhaustion can sharpen tempers at home just as they do elsewhere. Love does not float above material conditions. It has to make its bed inside them. Grandmothers and older women hold tremendous influence in many families and communities. They carry remedies, stories, warnings, recipes, songs, births, deaths, and genealogies in their minds. They know who belongs to whom, which households are safe to approach, which men are unreliable, which herb to boil for a cough, which prayer to say over a feverish child. Their authority may not be recognized in court, but it is recognized around the hearth. When an elder woman speaks plainly, younger people often listen, even when they pretend not to, especially then. Sisterhood can be equally powerful. Biological sisters share the luck or misfortune of birth, but women also become sisters through work and circumstance. They braid each other's hair, trade cloth, share secrets, cover for one another, and recognize each other's weariness without a full explanation. One woman may notice your silence and know it is fear. Another may hear your laughter and know it is forced. Such perception is its own kind of shelter. Black women's friendships in this era are often underdocumented, but the texture of daily life suggests they were essential. Nobody survives long on labour alone. You need someone who can look at your face and tell when the day has gone crooked. Loss shadows everything. A baby may die of fever, weakness, or infection before its first birthday. A mother may not survive childbirth. A father may disappear into sale or debt. A sister may be sent away. A partner may be hired out so far that visits become impossible. A free relative may be kidnapped into slavery, which did happen in the early Republic with horrifying frequency. Grief enters households quietly and then takes up too much room. Sometimes there is time for mourning. Often there is only work that must continue while the heart catches up later, if later ever truly comes. Black women often became the keepers of family memory because memory itself could be an act of resistance. You repeat names so they are not lost. You tell a child where his father was born, what his grandmother used to sing, which cousin had a laugh that filled a yard, what day the baby first stood, which old aunt claimed she could predict rain from her knees, and was annoyingly often correct. These things matter. Systems of power thrive on reducing people to labour units. Family memory restores texture. Food ties families together too. The meal may be simple, but its sharing creates shape in the day. Greens cooked down with fat, cornbread broken by hand, beans, rice, fish when available, sweet potato, molasses if there is some. A mother passing the larger portion to a child while pretending she was not that hungry anyway. A partner sneaking home something saved from work. A grandmother insisting everyone eat before talking serious matters. The smell of supper can gather people into one emotional space even before they sit down. Discipline within families is complicated and painful as well. Parents in dangerous societies often try to protect children by teaching caution early. Do not speak that way there. Do not linger on that road. Do not answer back in that house. Do not trust that smile. Such lessons can sound stern, but they are frequently made of fear translated into instruction. A black woman raising children in 1805 is not merely teaching manners. She's teaching navigation through a world that can punish innocence as quickly as boldness. Scholars continue to discuss how much authority black women could exercise within their households under slavery, because the answer shifts sharply with local conditions and the violence of specific owners. Yet many historians agree that women played a central role in preserving domestic routines, moral instruction, and emotional continuity. That continuity could never be complete. Too much was unstable. But partial continuity still mattered. A repeated bedtime prayer, a familiar lullaby, a cherished nickname, a habit of combing a child's hair the same way every Sunday. These create threads strong enough to hold identity when other structures fail. Sometimes family is also the site of deep frustration. Crowded rooms breed arguments. Hunger makes tempers thin. A partner may disappoint you. A teenage child may test every boundary with the confidence of someone who does not yet understand consequences. An elder may criticize how you cook, clean, parent, or choose company. Affection does not remove irritation. In fact, it often gives irritation better aim. But even these quarrels reveal something important. They show that family life is real and textured, not made of saintly poses. Black women were not symbols floating above ordinary human complexity. They were people managing it under extraordinary pressure. As night settles and the voices in a household soften, you feel what family costs and what it gives. It costs worry, sacrifice, compromise, and sometimes heartbreak so sharp it leaves the room changed forever. It gives belonging, duty, laughter, instruction, witness, and reasons to keep moving when the world would rather have you collapse quietly. In 1805, black women often stand at the emotional centre of family life while being denied legal power over it. They carry children, stories, meals, warnings, comfort, and memory. They hold people together with hands already tired from everything else. Love does not save them from danger, but it does create something danger cannot fully own. Power in 1805 does not always arrive with fanfare. Often it comes as a rule spoken casually, as if it were the weather. You are told where to go, when to stand, how to answer, what to carry, what not to ask, whom not to visit, when to stop speaking, when to begin again. For black women, control lives in the smallest details as much as in the largest laws. It shapes movement, clothing, labour, worship, family, and even the tone of the human voice. The message is constant. Stay in the place assigned to you. Do not make the people above you uncomfortable with too much selfhood. If you are enslaved, the structure is blunt. Your time is not yours. Your labour is commanded. Your body is watched. The authority of enslavers, overseers, mistresses, and other white household members reaches into daily life with frightening ease. Orders may be given sharply or softly, but softness does not make them optional. A woman can be summoned from her meal, her child, her sleep, or her own thoughts. She may be judged for speed, posture, expression, silence, speech, or supposed attitude. You begin to understand that under domination, even ordinary behaviour can be interpreted as insolence if the wrong person wishes it so. That uncertainty is part of the control. Rules are not always fixed because unpredictability helps maintain fear. One day a certain tone is accepted. The next day the same tone is called disrespect. One woman is punished for speaking too boldly. Another is punished for failing to answer quickly enough. You're expected to read moods with great precision, as though emotional weather forecasting were a household duty. Sadly, no official medal is awarded for detecting danger in a raised eyebrow. Mistresses hold a particularly complicated power over black women's daily lives. In households, white women often supervise food, clothing, childcare, laundry, cleaning, and personal service. Their own dependence on black women's labour can breed intimacy of routine without equality, familiarity without justice. A mistress may know how you fold linen, how you braid hair, how you soothe a child, how you season beans, and still treat you as an extension of household property. She may demand obedience while also confiding complaints, which is one of history's less charming social arrangements. Punishment under slavery ranges from verbal humiliation to deprivation, forced sale, confinement, and physical violence. The threat itself is often enough to shape behaviour long before actual punishment occurs. Historians agree that enslaved women faced physical coercion as a constant possibility, though the exact forms varied by region, owner, and work regime. Records reveal whippings, shackling, restrictions on food, separation from children, and other methods intended to enforce labour and submission. The archive is incomplete, but complete enough to leave no comforting illusions. For black women, sexual coercion also lurks inside these systems of control, even when the records refuse to speak plainly. White men in positions of power could exploit enslaved women with near total impunity. This is one of the ugliest truths of the era. Contemporary documents often hide it behind polite language, silence, or evasive phrasing, but later testimonies and careful historical work make the reality unmistakable. A woman's vulnerability is increased not only by law, but by the widespread refusal of that law to protect her. The body becomes a place where power insists on being felt. Free black women are not outside control either. Their lives may not be defined by ownership, but they are still hemmed in by passes, registration systems, labour discrimination, curfews, racial harassment, and the constant risk of being accused, detained, or disbelieved. In some places, free black people must carry papers proving status. Imagine having to carry documentary evidence of your own existence as a lawful person. Then imagine how calmly society expects you to do it. A lost paper. A suspicious official or a dishonest white witness can turn daily life into danger. Movement is especially regulated. You may need permission to leave a plantation, visit a spouse, attend a gathering, go to market, or travel after dark. Patrols, local ordinances, and informal white surveillance work together to make black mobility seem suspicious by default. For women, this restriction cuts sharply into social and family life. A visit to her mother, a walk to a meeting, a trip to sell produce. Even attendance at worship can depend on someone else's approval. The distance between two places is measured not only in miles, but in permission. Speech is also policed. How loudly may you speak, or how directly may you answer? May you look a white person in the eye or not? Customs differ by place, but the danger lies in never forgetting that ordinary human expression can be read through racial hierarchy. A black woman who appears too quiet may be called sly. One who appears too lively may be called impertinent. One who speaks with intelligence may alarm those who prefer obedience to competence. You learn to make language serve survival, shaping your words to fit the room while protecting whatever part of yourself can remain unspoken. Religion is another battleground. Christianity spreads widely in the early republic, and many black women participate deeply in religious life. Yet worship is often supervised, restricted, or moulded to reinforce obedience. White ministers may emphasize submission. Gatherings may be monitored. Night meetings can be treated with suspicion. At the same time, black worshippers adapt, reinterpret, and create spiritual meaning within and around these limits. Historians still argue about how much autonomy early black religious communities could exercise in different regions, but they broadly agree that worship offered both solace and a language of dignity that could not be fully contained by those in power. A curious but telling feature of control in this era is the obsession with passes and written permission. A slip of paper can determine whether your movement is treated as lawful or criminal. Literacy, therefore, becomes quietly dangerous from the perspective of those who dominate. The more a person can read, write, count, remember, and communicate independently, the harder she is to fully contain. This is one reason many slave societies limit education for black people, especially after moments of unrest. Knowledge unsettles hierarchy. It always has. Clothing can be regulated too. Enslaved women may be issued garments rather than allowed choice. Free black women who dress well may attract criticism for seeming above their station. A head wrap may be required in one place, expected in another, mocked in a third. Respectability becomes a moving target designed partly to exhaust. Even cleanliness can be politicized. A neatly dressed black woman might be praised by some observers as industrious and condemned by others as pretentious. The point is not consistency. The point is keeping judgment available at all times. Domestic space, which ought to offer relief, often extends the reach of discipline. A woman working in a household may be watched while cooking, sewing, nursing, and cleaning. Her speed is monitored, her honesty is doubted, her care is demanded. The same child she comforts may be used as a reason to summon her at any hour. Household intimacy makes surveillance feel almost natural, which is part of its cruelty. Being near does not mean being trusted. It means being available. Community gatherings are controlled because gatherings create possibility. People who meet may exchange news, form attachments, organize mutual aid, fall in love, share grievances, pass along warnings, teach one another songs, prayers, remedies, routes, and names. Authorities understand this, which is why they often try to regulate dances, prayer meetings, markets, and nighttime visits. A gathering looks harmless until one remembers that relationships are powerful. A woman who knows other women, who knows who can help, who knows where to go, is already less isolated than the system prefers. Children are drawn into this system early. Black girls learn quickly that adults expect deference from them that has very little to do with actual morality and everything to do with hierarchy. They may be corrected for posture, tone, movement, eye contact, or delay. Their work begins young, their play is interrupted more easily, their futures are discussed in terms of usefulness. Yet girls also observe everything. They watch how older women navigate authority, when to yield, when to delay, when to speak sweetly, when to fall silent, when to carry themselves with a composure that reveals nothing. The law itself often treats black women in contradictory ways. At times it sees them as dependents, at other times as labouring bodies, at other times still as threats to social order if they move too freely, trade too independently, or gather too confidently. In the law's imagination, they are whatever is most useful to restrain at that moment. This instability is exhausting because it means there is no single role that secures safety. Compliance offers only partial shelter. Innocence offers none at all. There are smaller punishments too. The daily abrasions that do not always make it into formal records, a withheld kindness, a mocking comment, a command barked for show, an accusation of laziness after hours of labour, the forced use of diminutive names, the refusal to acknowledge kin ties, the habit of speaking about a woman in her presence as though she were furniture with opinions. These acts matter because they wear at the edges of personhood. Grand violence is terrible. So is steady erosion. Yet even under pressure, black women develop finely tuned methods of judgment. You read households. You know which rules are rigid and which are theatrical. You sense when an order is about labour and when it is about humiliation. You understand which white people enjoy power most, which ones can be negotiated with, which ones are unpredictable, which ones are simply foolish in ways that make danger more chaotic. Such discernment is not paranoia, it is skill. It is a survival craft sharpened by necessity. Some women become adept at appearing compliant while quietly defending small zones of autonomy. A task is done thoroughly, but not eagerly. A question is answered politely, but not richly. A child is protected by seeming merely attentive. A bit of food is set aside without spectacle. A private thought is kept behind an unreadable face. Control may be extensive, but it is never total in the inward sense. The mind remains a difficult territory to occupy permanently. As evening comes, commands may soften in number but not in meaning. The day has been shaped by watchfulness. You have measured your voice, your steps, your glances, your pace, your associations. You have moved through a web of law, custom, fear, and expectation designed to narrow the range of your choices. This is what control looks like in 1805 for black women. It is legal and domestic, public and intimate, loud and quiet. It sits in the pass paper and the kitchen doorway, in the patrol road and the mistress's bell, in the threat of punishment and the habit of being observed. And still, within that hard net, a self keeps thinking, judging, remembering, and waiting for chances to breathe more freely. Even in a life crowded with labour and control, joy does not vanish. It becomes smaller, quicker, harder to catch perhaps, but it remains stubbornly alive. For black women in 1805, pleasure is rarely grand or leisurely. It comes in moments. A song rising while hands are busy, a good joke landing at exactly the right time, a baby laughing with complete disregard for the seriousness of adults, the smell of something sweet in the pot, a prayer that steadies the chest, a bit of evening air after a long day indoors. These are not trivial comforts. They are part of how a person remains a person. Faith often sits near the centre of these moments, though not always in the formal way that official records prefer. You may know Bible verses by ear rather than from a page. You may have heard sermons that emphasize obedience, yet still draw from the same stories a different lesson altogether. Moses, deliverance, exile, endurance, justice. These themes settle differently when you live under domination. A line of scripture can be both comfort and coded hope. A hymn can soothe the nerves and sharpen the mind at the same time. Religious life for black women in 1805 is varied and layered. In some places you attend white-controlled churches, sitting apart or entering by a separate door. In other places you gather in homes, brush arbours, yards, or hidden outdoor meetings where the air smells of crushed leaves and damp soil. Some communities blend African spiritual memory with Protestant forms. Others follow more structured Baptist, Methodist, Anglican, or Catholic practice depending on region. Scholars still debate exactly how much African ritual continuity survived openly in different places, yet many agree that rhythm, call and response, spirit possession traditions, naming practices, healing customs, and communal worship carried deep traces of older worlds. Prayer can be public, but it is often private too. A woman may pray while kneading dough, while hanging laundry, while walking a path in the dark, while waiting through labour pains, while cooling a feverish child with a cloth. Faith in such a life is not always polished theology. Sometimes it's a whispered sentence repeated under the breath until the heart stops racing. Sometimes it's a bargain with heaven made over a washtub. Sometimes it's simply the refusal to believe that suffering is the final truth. Song is one of the great carriers of feeling. Voices lift during work, during worship, during walking, during childcare, during mourning, during celebration. A tune may begin low and be taken up by another woman nearby. Harmony can form without planning. The sound of it changes the room. A kitchen with two women singing feels different from a kitchen with only clattering pots. A yard with voices rising together feels different from one ruled only by orders. Song gives shape to breath. And breath itself can feel like freedom when the day has pressed too hard. Work songs, spirituals in early form, lullabies, teasing songs, hymn lines, field calls, and play songs all contribute to a sound world that is richer than outsiders often understood. Some melodies soothe children. Some keep rhythm during repetitive labour. Some carry double meanings. Historians argue over how clearly coded certain songs were in this early period, and it is wise not to force every lyric into secret rebellion. Still, music plainly offered memory, solidarity, emotion, an expression beyond the control of written authority. A person may stop your steps. It is much harder to stop what people hum to themselves. A quirky little detail from many communities is the importance of improvised instruments and body rhythm. Hands clap, feet stamp, spoons knock against bowls, a bench, a bucket, a chest lid, or a stick against a porch post can join the music. You do not always need a formal instrument to produce joy. The body itself is a percussion section waiting for a chance. Human beings are wonderfully inconvenient that way. Food offers another pocket of comfort. Not abundance, usually, but flavour, memory, and company. A pot of greens simmering low with onion or fat can fill a room with a smell that feels almost like reassurance. Cornbread pulled warm from the fire invites hands before patience. Sweet potato, peas, rice, fish, okra, beans, molasses, and preserved fruit all carry regional differences and family habits. Black women often shape meals under difficult constraints, stretching little into enough, turning scraps into supper and preserving taste where wealth is absent. Good seasoning is one of history's most underrated forms of dignity. Shared eating matters just as much as the food itself. A bowl passed around, a child coaxed to take one more bite, someone saving the choicest piece for an elder, a woman pretending she's not hungry so others will eat first. Community shows itself most clearly around the table, even when the table is a crate, a stool, or simply a lap and a spoon. Supper can be brief, but it gathers people into one emotional rhythm. The scrape of spoons, the low talk, the warmth of cooked food in tired bodies, all create a kind of evening peace. Laughter may be the most subversive pleasure of all. It arrives in odd places. A hen getting into a place she absolutely knows she should not be. A child repeating an adult phrase with perfect wicked timing. A man trying to appear grand while losing an argument to a woman with better sense. A pot boiling over at the exact moment someone claimed they had everything under control. Black women's humour in hard times is often dry, observant, and beautifully economical. It can be teasing, affectionate, protective, or sharp enough to shave bark from a tree. You laugh not because life is easy, but because sometimes laughter is the only reply that keeps bitterness from taking over the room. Storytelling belongs to these hours too. When evening softens the pace, older women and men may tell family stories, Bible stories, animal tales, cautionary tales, and memories from places near or far. A trickster tale can entertain children while quietly teaching adults not to trust appearances. A family anecdote may preserve a name otherwise absent from the record. Oral tradition carries history through voice, gesture, timing, and response. A raised eyebrow at the right part of a story can be as meaningful as the sentence itself. Scholars have long noted the importance of oral culture in black communities, especially where literacy was restricted. A story told well is not merely entertainment, it is storage. Children's games bring another flavour of joy. They clap hands, chase, sing circles, mimic adults, and invent rules that change in the middle with suspicious convenience. Little girls may rock dolls made of rags or corn husks. Boys and girls both turn sticks into swords, canes or horses, or fishing poles depending on the urgency of imagination. Watching children play can briefly alter the atmosphere of a whole household. Their energy spills into the adults, even if only as a tired smile while shelling peas. Courting and social visits offer sweetness too, though they are often constrained by status and permission. A visit after supper, a quiet word at a gathering, a shared walk carrying water a little more slowly than necessary, a compliment tucked into ordinary talk, a ribbon noticed, a loaf praised perhaps more warmly than the bread alone deserves. Human beings continue to flirt under remarkably inconvenient circumstances. Frankly, one has to admire the dedication. Black women also create joy through beauty and care. Hair braided carefully, a head wrap tied in a pleasing way, a collar washed clean, a patch sewn so neatly it almost looks like decoration, a room swept until it feels calmer, a child bathed and wrapped for sleep. Beauty here is practical, moral, and emotional all at once. It says life is worth tending. It says the eye still matters. The senses still matter. The spirit still wants some loveliness even when money is scarce and authority is unkind. Dancing appears wherever space and permission allow, at celebrations, gatherings, weddings, holidays, or simple communal evenings. Movement becomes release. Feet beat out patterns on packed earth or wooden floors. Skirts sway. Laughter bursts free. Someone calls time. Someone shows off. Someone older pretends not to enjoy it and then proves suspiciously good at the steps. Dance carries African inheritances, local adaptations, and sheer personal flair. It is exercise, expression, courtship, competition, and joy all at once. Bodies so often used for labour reclaim movement for delight. Healing also belongs among these small joys. The relief of an herb tea easing a cough, the coolness of water on a hot face, the first deep breath after a child's fever breaks, the comfort of another woman rubbing a sore back or combing a tender scalp. Care can produce pleasure not because it is luxurious, but because it interrupts pain. In a world of chronic strain, relief feels almost radiant. There are Sundays and holy days in some communities, though their exact freedom depends on place and power. A cleaner dress might come out, a better head-wrap, shoes, if they exist, may be saved for such occasions. The pace shifts. People greet one another. Singing lengthens. Food may be a little better. A meeting may include testimony, instruction, whispered news, and social exchange in equal measure. Even where white oversight hangs over worship, black women often use such gatherings to build ties, trade knowledge, and nourish the spirit. The official purpose of a gathering is not always the whole purpose. Nature can offer quiet comfort as well. The smell of pine after rain, fireflies rising near dusk, cool river water over hot wrists, moonlight on a path, the rustle of summer leaves overhead. Women who spend long hours outdoors also develop a deep sensory relationship with land and weather, even when they do not own the ground beneath their feet. You notice ripening fruit, bird calls, cloud colour, the promise of rain in the air. These observations are practical, certainly, but they can also be gently beautiful. The world still gives gifts even when society does not. Some historians caution against romanticising resilience, and they are right to do so. Joy is not proof that suffering was mild. Laughter does not cancel coercion. Faith does not excuse injustice. Yet it would be equally false to imagine black women in 1805 as living only in sorrow. People do not survive long without pleasures, rituals, and moments of brightness. These are not decorative extras. They are part of survival itself. So when evening settles and the air cools just enough to soften the day, you may hear a hymn line drift across a yard, or catch the smell of cornbread, or watch a child doze against a mother's shoulder, while adults trade low jokes nearby. A hand taps a beat on the table. Another voice joins the song. Someone laughs so hard she has to wipe her eyes. Someone says amen in a tone that means more than agreement. In these moments, black women make room for joy inside a world that rarely offers it generously. They find warmth in prayer, music, story, taste, touch, and fellowship. Small sparks, perhaps, but enough to light a life. In 1805, the phrase black woman does not describe one fixed life. It describes many lives lived under very different conditions, though those conditions are connected by race, labour, danger, and the constant need to navigate other people's power. Some women are enslaved on plantations. Some live on small farms. Some are free in northern towns. Some are free in southern port cities under tightening restrictions. Some were born in America. Some were born in the Caribbean or in Africa and carry older memories, languages, and habits into a new and often brutal landscape. Status matters, region matters, age matters, skill matters, yet freedom itself, where it exists, is far less secure than the word sounds. To be enslaved is to live inside an open system of ownership and command. The law in slaveholding places names you as property, or folds you into property relations so thoroughly that daily life is shaped around someone else's claim. Your labour can be sold. Your children can inherit your status. Your movement can be checked. Your family can be broken by transaction. The violence is formal, visible, and backed by custom. That much is painfully clear. To be free is different, but not simple. Freedom may mean you can choose certain kinds of work, marry with legal standing in some places, hold wages, rent a room, worship more openly, travel with somewhat greater independence, or build a household not directly ruled by an enslaver. These are significant differences. They matter deeply. A free black woman may shape her day with more personal intention. She may decide where to seek employment, whom to live with, how to arrange a room, how to dress for church, how to spend a small sum she has earned. These are real powers. They're just not powers the wider society is eager to leave undisturbed. A free woman often wakes each morning under the burden of proving that her freedom is valid. Papers matter. Witnesses matter. White opinion matters far too much. In some places, officials demand proof of status. In others, neighbours or employers can question it. The possibility of kidnapping into slavery is horrifyingly real in parts of the early Republic, especially where the line between legal freedom and illegal seizure can be exploited by those who know black testimony will be discounted. So even freedom can feel like something carried in fragile hands, always at risk of being knocked loose. Northern states by 1805 include places where gradual emancipation laws have begun to dismantle slavery, but not all at once, and not always cleanly. Some enslaved people remain in bondage under transitional systems. Some children are born into terms of service that stretch far into adulthood. Free black communities grow in cities like Philadelphia and New York, yet racism still shapes employment, housing, education, and public treatment. A free black woman in the North may have no owner, but she may still be trapped in poorly paid labour as a laundress, domestic servant, market seller, or seamstress. Freedom opens the door a crack. It does not suddenly furnish the room. In the South, free black women may live in cities such as Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, Baltimore, or smaller towns where people know their names, their work, and their precarious place in the local order. Some hire out skilled labour, some run small businesses, some take in washing or sewing, some sell food in markets, some belong to old free black communities formed through manumission, mixed ancestry, military service, or long local history. Others are newly freed and trying to secure kin, income, and documents all at once. Southern freedom often brings closer surveillance, sharper legal restrictions, and the persistent need to avoid attracting the wrong kind of attention. Region changes everyday texture in powerful ways. In coastal towns, the air smells of salt, fish, tar, sewage, and wet rope. Markets hum with voices, carts, gulls, and bargaining. Urban black women can sometimes build denser networks through churches, mutual aid, and neighbourhood ties. In rural interior regions, the pace follows fields, roads, and seasons more closely. Distances between households may be greater. Community can be harder to assemble physically, yet kin and neighbourhood ties still matter intensely. A woman's world may be bounded by a few miles of road and still contain a rich web of relationships. Language also varies. Many black women in 1805 speak forms of English shaped by region, labour, and community. Some are multilingual or familiar with African or Creole languages, in places touched strongly by the Atlantic world, especially port cities in the Gulf South. You may hear French, Spanish, African languages, patois, and local mixtures alongside English. That linguistic texture can create opportunities for trade, solidarity, and secrecy. It can also produce tension with authorities who mistrust what they do not understand. Historians continue to debate how long particular African languages remained in active daily use in different communities, but there is no doubt that language shaped belonging and memory. Colour and ancestry affect experience too, though never in ways that erase the brutality of racial hierarchy. Some free black women of mixed ancestry may receive limited advantages in certain places through family connections, skilled training, or lighter treatment from parts of white society. Others find that these supposed advantages are unstable, resented, or bought at moral cost. Respectability can be granted one day and withdrawn the next. Colorism exists, but it does not offer safety anyone should envy. The social ladder is shaky all the way up. A curious detail of free black life in some urban areas is the careful performance of respectability through dress, church attendance, and household order. A woman may polish shoes, starch a collar, keep a room tidy, and attend worship not only from preference or faith, but because visible order can help defend reputation. Reputation matters when employers choose workers, landlords choose tenants, and hostile neighbours look for reasons to accuse. Appearance becomes strategy. A neat apron can do more social labour than an entire speech. Still, Free black women are not only reacting to white scrutiny, they are building worlds. They form church congregations, benevolent groups, family networks, and informal systems of care. They save money, teach children manners and prayers, help newcomers find work, nurse the sick, and sometimes purchase the freedom of relatives. In cities, some women become central figures in neighbourhood life simply because everyone knows they can be trusted to organise help, pass along news, or keep calm during trouble. Leadership does not always need a title. For enslaved women, the distinctions of region and work still matter greatly. A woman labouring in rice country experiences the day differently from one in a tobacco county, a town household, or a small farm. Work gangs, task systems, urban hiring arrangements, and domestic labour all create different pressures and possibilities. In some places, women have a bit more room to garden, market, or move within community life. In others, surveillance is tighter and the labour regime harsher. Scholars still disagree about which systems allowed more day-to-day autonomy, because the answer can shift from estate to estate. A task system may look less supervised on paper, yet remain severe in practice. A town arrangement may offer movement, but also exposure. Freedom and constraint do not sit in clean boxes. Age changes status as well. Young girls are taught labour early and watched closely. Older women may gain a degree of informal authority through skill, reputation, or motherhood. An experienced midwife, healer, cook, or washerwoman can become indispensable in ways that shape how others treat her, though indispensability is never the same as security. Old age itself is uncertain. Some women are worn down long before they are truly old. Others survive into grandmotherhood and hold families together through memory and presence. A bent back does not mean a weak mind, often quite the opposite. Free black women who own property, though relatively rare, occupy a particularly complicated position. Property may provide income, stability, and standing within community life. Yet ownership does not remove racial vulnerability. A deed cannot prevent insult. A business can still be undercut by prejudice. A successful black woman may attract resentment precisely because she contradicts the social order that white society prefers to imagine. Prosperity, where it exists, has to be defended. Some women live in the middle ground between slavery and secure freedom, and this may be the most unsettling position of all. Hired-out labourers, indentured servants, illegally detained people, runaways living under assumed names, and those promised manumission later all inhabit precarious space. The law may not know what to do with them, or may know perfectly well and do it cruelly. Their lives can hinge on documents, witnesses, promises, technicalities, and the honesty of people not famous for honesty. You can be almost free in a way that is more nerve-wracking than a straightforward description allows. The Atlantic world also shapes these differences. A black woman in New Orleans, with French and Spanish legal inheritances still influencing local custom, may encounter a social order different from that of Virginia or Massachusetts. Caribbean migration carries foodways, language, religion, and political memory into American ports. News of uprisings, emancipation debates, wars, and maritime labour travels through docks, taverns, markets, and ship crews. Black women are part of these information networks even when formal politics excludes them. They hear things. They compare conditions. They measure rumours against their own experience. Children born to free mothers inherit one set of possibilities. Children born to enslaved mothers inherit another, at least under the law of most slaveholding jurisdictions. That single legal principle shapes enormous emotional reality. A free woman may still fear for her child's safety, but she can often imagine a future based on work, marriage, church, community, or migration. An enslaved mother must imagine all that through the bars of ownership. The difference is profound. Yet even among the free, hope is negotiated with caution. Many futures remain narrow. Historians caution against flattening black women's lives in 1805 into one shared script. And they are right. Too much depends on place, status, family, and local law. But there is also a danger in overemphasizing difference until common patterns disappear. Whether free or enslaved, many black women contend with hard labour, racial suspicion, gendered expectation, limited legal protection, and the need to build life in spaces not designed for their flourishing. The particulars shift. The pressure remains. You can feel these contrasts most clearly in simple scenes. One woman rises in a city room she rents with her own wages and worries whether the landlord will increase the rent or whether patrols will challenge her papers after dark. Another rises in a plantation cabin and worries whether her child will be hired out, whether she will be sent to a new task, whether a mistress is already displeased. One woman chooses what to carry to market and calculates prices. Another carries what she's ordered to carry and calculates moods. Both think carefully. Both scan danger. Both find ways to care for others with resources too small for the need. Freedom, then, is neither illusion nor miracle. It is real, precious, and often constrained. Enslavement is not merely a harsher version of difficulty. It is a fundamentally different condition built on ownership and force. Yet the line between the two, in practical daily life, can be exposed to harassment, theft, and legal betrayal. That is what makes the era so unsettling. A free black woman may possess rights that matter deeply while living in a society prepared to violate them. An enslaved woman may carve out spaces of family, worship, skill, and self-respect while knowing the law denies her basic personhood. In 1805, black women live across these uneven categories, not safely inside them. Their lives differ sharply, but all require alertness, ingenuity, and a courage the official record rarely bothers to measure. Resistance does not always look dramatic from a distance. History loves a trumpet, a blaze, a bold escape into the night. Those things matter, of course. But for black women in 1805, resistance is often quieter, more constant, and stitched into the ordinary fabric of the day. It lives in timing, memory, refusal, concealment, tone, and choice. It appears in the gap between what power demands and what the spirit quietly preserves for itself. A woman may not be able to overturn the system around her by noon, inconvenient though that would have been for the system, but she can still resist it in ways that matter deeply. One form of resistance is the protection of inner life. You do not hand every thought to the people who command your labour. You keep judgments private. You preserve opinions behind a neutral face. You remember insults accurately rather than letting them dissolve into the general fog of oppression. That memory is important. It prevents injustice from disguising itself as normal. It says, "No, I know what was done here. The world may deny your account. But your own mind does not have to join the lie. Control depends partly on defining you from the outside. Resistance begins when you continue defining yourself from within. You know your own name and the names of your people, even if others misuse them. You know what you are good at. You know who taught you to braid, season, mend, heal, pray, and endure. You know the sound of your child's laugh, the look on your sister's face before she speaks, the exact herb your grandmother trusted for a stomach complaint. This knowledge may seem small beside laws and whips and account books. It is not small, it is identity, and identity is stubborn. Work itself becomes a site of quiet negotiation. A task may be done slowly when slowness protects the body or undermines unreasonable demands. A message may take longer to deliver than strictly necessary, because someone on the path must be warned of something. A garment may be mended just well enough to pass inspection, while the better thread is saved for your own household. A chicken may lay eggs that do not all enter the official count. A garden plot may produce food that stretches beyond what those in power intended you to have. These actions are not laziness, they are tactics. Historians agree that enslaved people frequently resisted through everyday acts, such as feigning illness, slowing labour, breaking tools, stealing food, preserving family ties, and withholding information. They also caution that records of such acts are uneven because masters notice some forms more readily than others. Black women's resistance is especially easy for the archive to miss, since domestic labour, childcare, nursing, and household tasks produce fewer dramatic documents than open revolt. Yet careful reading of plantation records, court cases, and later testimonies reveals a pattern of constant pressure from below. The system was never as smoothly obeyed as its defenders wished to imagine. Food is one of the most practical fields of resistance. A woman who controls a kitchen, a garden patch, or part of the distribution of meals has opportunities to nourish those she chooses. She can stretch portions toward children, elders, or the sick. She can save scraps. She can share with the neighbours. She can decide which flavour makes a dish feel like home rather than mere fuel. This may seem domestic rather than political, but when a system seeks to dominate bodies, feeding bodies on humane terms becomes deeply political. A spoonful matters. Knowledge is another quiet weapon. You memorise routes, schedules, temperaments, passwords of trust, the habits of patrols, which door hinges squeak, which dogs bark, which neighbours can hold a secret, which cannot keep one if tied shut in a kettle. Black women often sit close to the flow of information because they move through households, yards, markets, wash spaces, and church circles. They overhear. They compare stories. They notice what white people say in front of them because they assume not much listening is taking place. That assumption is one of power's more generous mistakes. For women in towns and cities, market life can create its own possibilities. Selling produce, cakes, fish, vegetables, or laundry services places you in conversation with many people across a day. News travels with astonishing speed through baskets and street corners. A rumour from the docks, a warning about patrols, word of a sale, word of a sickness, word that someone has run, word that a minister is visiting, word that a relative was seen 3 miles off with good shoes and terrible ideas. Information keeps communities alive. Passing it carefully can be a form of protection. Literacy, where accessible, carries special power. Many black women in 1805 were denied reading and writing through law, violence, or lack of opportunity. Yet some learned anyway, secretly or through loopholes. A child in a white household may overhear lessons, a free relative may teach letters, a Bible passage may become the first doorway into reading. A name written once may be memorized and copied later by firelight or on scraps. Historians still debate how widespread clandestine literacy among enslaved women was at this exact moment. But there is broad agreement that black women sought knowledge whenever they could because knowledge expands choice. Even those who cannot read preserve and transmit sophisticated forms of knowledge. Oral memory can be astonishingly precise. A woman may remember kin links across plantations, towns, and counties. She may know who married whom, who was sold where, whose child was promised freedom, which owner drinks too much, which overseer naps after dinner, which road floods in spring, which preacher can be trusted, and which one repeats private talk to white ears. This is intelligence work in plain dress. It does not need paper to be real. Religion can also shelter resistance. A prayer meeting may look like submission from the outside and contain something more forceful within it. Scripture can be interpreted against oppression, not merely under it. The Exodus story, the idea of divine justice, the dignity of the soul, the equality of all before God. These themes do not sit quietly in the mind once planted. Women who lead songs, teach children prayers, or comfort mourners are also shaping moral imagination. They are saying, in effect, that the present order is not the final measure of truth. A quirky but important truth of domestic resistance is that appearance can deceive. A woman may seem merely busy with washing while also listening to every word spoken in the room. She may seem absorbed in braiding hair while exchanging crucial news in low tones. She may appear obedient while delaying just enough to spare someone else exposure. Household labour gives cover because it is expected to be constant. People overlook the intelligence of the person holding the basket. That oversight becomes useful. Black women resist through family too. They teach children caution and pride at once. They pass down names and origins. They keep fathers present in memory when distance threatens to erase them. They create rituals that preserve belonging. A bedtime prayer, a song, a phrase repeated in a certain way, a food cooked on a certain day. All these can assert continuity against a system built on disruption. This is especially powerful under slavery, where legal recognition of family is weak or absent. To insist that a child belongs to a lineage, a people, a memory, and a love larger than property law is a serious act of defiance. Some women resist bodily control by protecting one another, warning another woman away from danger, standing near during a tense interaction, offering shelter for a night, covering bruises with practical excuses, helping after childbirth, sharing remedies for pain or fertility. Scholars are careful here, because the evidence is partial and intimate matters rarely reach the archive cleanly. Still, many historians note that networks of women's care were essential to survival and likely included forms of mutual protection that official records could neither see nor comprehend well. Escape, when it occurs, is often imagined as a male story of roads and disguises. But black women run too. Some flee alone, some flee with children, some aim for kin, some seek cities where they can disappear into black neighbourhoods or domestic service. Some join maritime worlds through ports, others attempt short-term flight, hiding for days or weeks to pressure a negotiable situation or avoid immediate punishment. The risks are enormous. A woman carrying a child, pregnant, or tied to caregiving duties faces particular danger, yet the very fact that many still try reveals how unbearable ordinary conditions could be. Resistance can also be emotional discipline turned inside out. You refuse to let contempt become your self-image. You laugh with your own people in ways the powerful cannot decode. You preserve tenderness even when the world rewards hardness. This matters because domination tries to colonize feeling as well as labor. A woman who can still love, joke, pray, desire, imagine, and judge has not surrendered the center of herself. The body may be constrained, the heart still makes choices. Poisoning rumors appear in some historical records, and historians approach them cautiously. White people often accused enslaved women, especially cooks and healers, of secret poisoning with far more fear than proof. Some accusations were probably fantasies born of guilt and anxiety. Others may have reflected real acts of desperate resistance. The uncertainty itself is revealing. White households depended heavily on black women's intimate labour, while fearing the autonomy that labour required. The cook knew what entered the pot. The nurse knew what eased pain. The healer knew which roots helped and which harmed. Power rested uneasily beside dependence. Resistance also includes refusal to forget injustice. A woman may tell others exactly what happened in a sale, a beating, a betrayal, a broken promise. She keeps the story alive. She names the perpetrator. She teaches the next generation where trust should stop. Memory becomes a moral ledger when official law refuses to keep one. This is not passive. It shapes community judgment and survival strategy. It says we will not let your version be the only version that remains. In some communities, craftsmanship itself becomes a quiet statement of competence beyond the station assigned. Fine quilting, skilled midwifery, expert gardening, market strategy, herbal practice, and culinary mastery all create zones of authority. White society may try to reduce black women to labouring bodies, but expertise complicates that reduction. People seek out the woman who knows how to turn a baby, cure a cough, preserve peaches, cut a pattern, settle a frightened child, or coax poor soil into decent beans. Skill builds reputation. Reputation builds influence. Influence can shelter others. Children watch all of this. They see when an adult answers one way in public and another in private. They learn which truths are safe to speak aloud. They notice generosity, cunning, caution, and nerve. Black girls especially absorb models of womanhood that combine tenderness with sharp judgment. They see women who can laugh while assessing danger, comfort while planning, obey outwardly while preserving inward sovereignty. These lessons are not written in copybooks. They are lived. Historians sometimes call these forms of action everyday resistance, which is accurate but perhaps too mild for the reality. Everyday resistance is still resistance. It feeds people, protects knowledge, frustrates control, preserves selfhood, and keeps community alive under systems designed to crush it. It may not always appear in grand commemorations, yet it forms much of the actual lived struggle. So in 1805, when you picture a black woman moving through her day, do not imagine only burden. Imagine calculation, wit, memory, guarded speech, hidden generosity, strategic delay, careful listening, silent naming, and choices made in the narrow spaces available. Imagine her passing a warning while adjusting a child's collar. Imagine her saving seed, saving scraps, saving stories, saving strength. Imagine resistance not as a single loud moment, but as 1,000 acts of intelligence and refusal carried in capable hands. That is how many lives were defended, quietly, steadily, and with remarkable skill. What history says about black women in 1805 depends very much on who is speaking. That is one of the first problems. The loudest records are usually written by people with power, property, education, leisure, and the confidence to assume their version deserves the page. These records count output, punishment, births, deaths, prices, chores, church attendance, illnesses, and supposed character. They describe women as strong, troublesome, faithful, idle, fertile, insolent, useful, worn, prime, aging, likely, likely again, and gone. The language is often brisk. It moves past a whole human life with the emotional warmth of a grocery tally. And yet, if you look carefully, the silences begin to speak. A woman appears in an estate inventory, then in a baptism record, then in a sale, then in a burial entry, then nowhere. Somewhere inside those fragments was a laugh, a favourite food, a habit of tying cloth a certain way, a private fear of thunderstorms, a scar on one knee from childhood, a memory of a mother's song, a preference for sitting near the door, a dislike of one particular neighbour, a talent for soothing babies, a sharp opinion about foolish men, and 1,000 other details the record never thought important enough to keep. The tragedy is not only that power harmed these women, it is that power also wrote about them as though their inner lives hardly counted. When historians try to recover what life was really like, they have to read around the edges. They must look at household accounts, runaway notices, church rolls, court cases, letters, archaeology, oral traditions, recipes, clothing remains, settlement patterns, and later testimonies. They have to notice what is absent as much as what is present. If a woman appears repeatedly in laundry accounts, that tells you something about work. If she appears beside children in a baptism record, that tells you something about kin or community. If her cabin site contains beads, ceramics, food remains, pins, pipes, herbal traces, or carefully arranged objects, that tells you the domestic world had texture. Even a record written by an enslaver can reveal more than intended if you read it against itself. Complaint often points toward hidden resistance. Praise often points toward exhausting labour. Silence often points toward the limits of what the writer could understand. Black women in 1805 live at the crossing of race, gender, labour, family, and law. But they are not merely examples of those categories. They are individuals moving through specific mornings, rooms, roads, weather, sorrows, and brief moments of delight. One woman may have hands permanently rough from washwater. Another may know the market prices of fish and peaches by heart. Another may pray aloud with a voice that calms a room. Another may have delivered half the children in her district and buried some too. Another may be 14 and already carrying burdens that would bow a much older back. Another may be 70, slow in the knees, but still the person everyone consults before making a serious decision. The official record has a strange habit of flattening all this into labour. It notices what a woman can produce: lift, wash, nurse, plant, spin, cook, or bear. It notices whether she obeys. It notices whether she costs money or makes it. It notices whether she can be moved. What it fails to notice is judgment. Black women were making judgments all day long. Whom to trust, when to speak, how much to reveal, what to save, which child needed watching, which herb to use, which road to avoid, which rumour mattered, which look in a white face meant danger, which joke would bring relief without crossing a line, which memory had to be repeated so it would not disappear. Judgment is part of intelligence, and intelligence is part of personhood. The archive too often behaves as though only one of those things existed. There is also the matter of skill. Many black women in 1805 possessed skills so broad and practical that a whole household, farm, or neighbourhood could depend on them. Cooking over open hearths alone required timing, balance, and experience. Laundry required strength, heat management, stain knowledge, and endurance. Midwifery required nerve, observation, and trust. Herbal healing required memory, experimentation, and caution. Sewing, gardening, preserving food, raising children, making soap, spinning thread, nursing the sick, managing scarce supplies, and negotiating social danger all required different forms of expertise. These were not accidental talents. They were developed, taught, refined, and respected within black communities even when the larger society refused proper honour. A quirky but revealing detail is that many of the things people later celebrated as regional traditions were kept alive by women whose names disappeared from formal history. Recipes, remedies, hair practices, child-soothing methods, songs, sayings, planting habits, dye tricks, quilt patterns, and ways of seasoning food often travelled through women's hands and voices. Culture is not only made by famous men giving speeches in stiff collars. Much of it is carried by someone stirring a pot, braiding hair near a door, or humming while mending a sleeve. That kind of cultural labour rarely receives a monument. It deserves one. The deeper you look, the more obvious it becomes that black women helped hold entire worlds together while being denied the authority those worlds relied on. Plantations functioned through their labour. Urban households depended on their labour. Markets moved partly through their labour. Churches were steadied by their labour. Families survived by their labour. Yet public recognition was miserly at best. A woman could be indispensable and still be treated as replaceable. That contradiction sits at the centre of early American life like a stone nobody wanted to name honestly. Historians still argue over many important questions. How much autonomy did enslaved women have in arranging household life under different labour systems? How did African practices endure or change across regions and generations? How widespread was literacy among black women in specific places? How much influence did free black women wield in local economies? How can archaeologists distinguish ordinary household debris from spiritually meaningful placement? These debates matter, and they should remain careful. But uncertainty in the scholarly record should not be mistaken for uncertainty about humanity. We may not know every detail of a given woman's day. We do know she possessed an inner world, and that the systems around her tried very hard not to acknowledge it. That inner world included fatigue, certainly, but not fatigue alone. It included vanity sometimes, in the most human and harmless sense. The wish to look good in a head wrap, the satisfaction of a clean apron, the pleasure of being admired by a sweetheart. It included annoyance. Some people surely irritated the soul right out of a room. It included humour, grief, embarrassment, longing, disgust, pride, religious feeling, suspicion, boredom, and moments of peace. History often makes oppressed people sound morally pure or endlessly tragic, as if complexity were a luxury reserved for the powerful. Real life is never that tidy. Black women in 1805 were complicated because they were alive. It is also important to say plainly that suffering does not define the full value of these lives. Too much history asks oppressed people to justify attention by enduring something terrible. The pain matters. It must be named. But these women were not important only because they suffered. They were important because they thought, cared, built, interpreted, remembered, taught, desired, noticed beauty, and shaped communities. Their lives carried meaning independent of the injustice done to them. That should not be a radical statement, but history has made it one often enough. You can sense this truth in the smallest surviving clues. A carefully mended garment suggests care for appearance and thrift. A woman named repeatedly in birth records suggests trust and community presence. A remembered story about a healer suggests reputation. A treasured spoon, a bead, a lock of hair, a patchwork coverlet, or a recipe passed down over generations suggests attachment. Material things can hold feeling. So can habits. A woman who saved seed year after year was not just gardening. She was planning continuity. A woman who taught children songs was not just filling silence. She was building memory. A woman who insisted on proper washing before Sunday worship was not just being strict. She may have been declaring dignity in the face of a world organised against it. There is another distortion in the record that deserves attention. Black women are often described either as endlessly strong or endlessly vulnerable. In truth, they were both, and neither in simple form. Strength could be forced upon them by circumstances they did not choose. Vulnerability could coexist with immense competence. A woman might be physically exhausted and socially exposed while still making excellent decisions under pressure. She might fear authority and yet quietly outthink it. She might be unable to stop a sale and still preserve a family line through memory and care. The language of strength can become flattering in ways that hide cost. The language of vulnerability can become pitying in ways that hide agency. The reality resists both simplifications. A good deal of what history rarely says is sensory. It rarely says how smoke lived in cloth, how wet wool chilled the skin, how lye burned cracked fingers, how iron pots rang when set down hard, how a child's cheek felt after sleep, how a night road sounded when you were not sure who might be on it, how relief felt when rain finally came after heat, how a room changed when singing began. Yet those sensory details are not decorative. They are where life actually happens. Policy may shape a century, but smell, touch, sound, hunger, and bodily strain shape a day. Black women lived history through their senses long before anyone summarised them in a textbook. A woman in 1805 may never write her own account. She may leave no diary. She may sign no formal letter. Still, she leaves traces in people, in practice, in family habits, in local memory, in objects worn by use, in children taught well, in gardens planted, in songs repeated, in foods prepared, in stories told by descendants who know they came from someone formidable, even if the paper trail is thin. Influence does not disappear simply because official archives were careless with it. So when you ask what life was really like for black women in 1805, the deepest answer is that it was full. Full of labour, yes. Full of danger, yes. Full of control, deprivation, and unjust limits, certainly, but also full of skill, interpretation, humour, family feeling, spiritual life, bodily knowledge, practical intelligence, beauty, and quiet acts of self-assertion. The full truth resists any version that makes these women only victims, only workers, only symbols, or only saints. They were people carrying dense and difficult lives with extraordinary resourcefulness, and perhaps that is what history most often fails to say. It fails to say how much of early American life rested in the hands of women the official story kept near the margins. It fails to say how much culture, care, survival, and continuity moved through those hands. It fails to say how often entire communities depended on women whose names were misspelled, shortened, omitted, or reduced to a line item. It fails to say that the nation being built around them was learning from them, feeding on their labour, borrowing their knowledge, and denying their full humanity all at once. You sit with that truth as evening softens the edges of the day. The record is incomplete. The archive is biased. The names are too few. But enough remains to know this much. Black women in 1805 were not background figures in somebody else's drama. They were central human beings in their own right, moving through hard realities with minds awake, senses alert, and lives far richer than the old documents were prepared to admit. Now the night grows gentler. The sounds of the day begin to loosen and drift away. You can let the harder edges soften for a moment. Imagine a small room settling into quiet, the last murmur of voices fading, the fire lowering into a warm red glow. Cloth dries by the hearth. A child sleeps deeply at last. Outside, the air is cooled, and the dark holds the soft rustle of leaves and the far hum of insects. Nothing needs to be solved here. Nothing needs to be carried for a little while. You breathe in the faint scent of wood smoke and clean earth after heat. The floor is still, the doorway calm, the night patient. History, for all its noise, becomes very quiet at this hour. What remains is the human presence at the centre of it. Steady hands, tired feet, a clear mind, a life that mattered. Many lives that mattered. Let the room dim. Let the names you do not know rest beside the truths you do know. They worked, loved, feared, joked, prayed, endured, and kept something precious alive within themselves. That is enough to honour tonight, so that the darkness settles softly now, and the story can finally grow still. You can leave the sentry where it is, with its smoke, its footsteps, its rough cloth, its candlelight, and its unrecorded courage. Let it fade into distance. Let the quiet take over. Let sleep come gently.